Hey guys, this is Amber from NotableInk.com, and I am with Altenew today on their Build a Flower Crocus blog hop. So this is the Build a Flower set for June. If you're not already aware, they do have a subscription kit for their Build a Flower sets, and this particular flower is awesome because it's really versatile, and I'm going to show you how to use it as a crocus and how to also create a Gerber daisy with it. So here's the Build a Flower set. As always, the Build a Flower sets come with the coordinating dies, which is awesome. It's such a good value. And they also have a subscription kit available, which is even a better value, and you're guaranteed to get the set when it's released. So I definitely encourage you to check that out. Here's the layering guide that comes in the packaging, and take a look at how easy this one is to line up. So simple. I'm actually not even going to use my MISTI for this. I just have each layer of the stamps on separate stamp blocks, and I'm starting off with wisteria ink. I'm using the Enchanted Garden color set here, and I'm going to stamp it a few different ways. So here I stamped it just fully, inked it up, that first layer fully. Now I'm going to just do the rock and roll technique so that I only get the lightest color of ink around the edges. I'm going to do the rock and roll technique another time, and this time I'm just going to blend out those edges with a sponge dauber. And I blended them out and brought the color in a little bit more than I wanted to, but I wanted to show you that you can do this in a number of different ways. I'm going to move on to hydrangea ink for the second layer of the stamp. And again, so what we're lining up here is the stem of the flower and just the edges, kind of like all the way around the flower. It's so easy to line up. So when I stamp this layer here, you can see that my ink is a little blotchy on my stamp, and that's just because I needed to condition it again. So you can see I'm pulling out my eraser here. So I went ahead and did that before I started stamping at all, but sometimes as you're cleaning your stamp repetitively when you're stamping a bunch, you might need to condition it again while you're stamping. Now you will see that as we go through this, that ink, I'm going to move on to ultraviolet now, but that ink is going to smooth out as it dries. So here you can see I'm conditioning, and this is the third layer of this crocus stamp set. And I'm lining up not only the stem, but also those open areas that you can see on the very two front petals. They just kind of line up perfectly with the layer prior to it. So you can see that there, those two open areas. So after I'm done stamping these threes, I'm going to show you my favorite way to use layering stamps. So with the crocus stamp set, your first layer is completely solid. There's no white areas. I really love the look of bright white highlights on my flowers, which is why sometimes I'll use the rock and roll technique that you saw here. Sometimes though, and I would say probably most often, I completely omit the first layer if I want those really bright white highlights. And that's what I'm showing you here. So this was just the second and the third layer. So the first on the left is all three layers as intended. This one was the rock and roll technique, and this is the rock and roll with the sponge dauber. And you can see this is a little grainy there, and that's more smooth on the right. And then you can see how bright white the highlights are on the one that's separated on the right compared to the original one with all the layers. So we'll move on to stamping our sentiment on an A2 size piece of white cardstock, and I'm using Starlight ink here, and I absolutely love it when I can stamp it in just one go. I love it. And then here I have Wishing You, and these sentiments are from the Crocus set, and this is the Obsidian Pigment Ink, which is amazing. This ink is super dark and super crisp. You get such a great stamping with it. I just love it. So now what I'm going to do is dry emboss this. So I put a stencil on it and ran it through my die cutting machine. And then of course I never wait for my ink to dry. So I ran it through, and you can see it got on my stencil, but look, it didn't smear, which is amazing. Amazing. So okay, so you may notice that these flowers are different colors. I've also cut out 2 circles from metallic blue cardstock. It was Curious Metallic Cardstock, and I got that from cutcardstock.com. The reason these flowers are different is because when I originally started stamping them, my mom called me, and I just kept stamping. And that is why I have so many of these. And I actually had to go back and create the purple one so that I could have some on film for you guys. So once I had all these flowers and I die cut them, I kind of spread them out in my hands almost like a deck of cards, which is what gave me the idea for this card. So these flowers are such great petals to create a Gerber daisy. So I've just put some adhesive, some Altenew glue tape runner on the corner there, and I'm just gently kind of pressing these down so that I can still move them and fiddle with them if I need to, just so I can get my arrangement down. I'm going to go ahead and put some foam adhesive on the back of the circles and get those pressed down. And then I'm going to trim the petals from the back. I did want some overhanging petals, so you're going to see me fiddle around with the arrangement a little bit, which is why I didn't want to totally glue down the petals from the start. So here I'm thinking about, okay, which petal do I want to cut off? That one was really big, so I cut that off. But for the petal above it, you can see down at the bottom there, I just let that hang over a little bit. And it takes a little bit to get through that many layers. Here, I felt like it was a little offset, and I didn't want to cut off those petals, so I just moved that in a little bit. And then I needed to change the placement of my circle here to get that centered. So you can see the flowers aren't glued down very well, but that's okay because I'm going to take some small dimensional adhesive and put it beneath the petals so that I can pop those up and give the whole flower more dimension overall. I'm just using this piece of cardstock to see what it'll look like when I cut it off to make sure that I like the arrangement. And I didn't like the top, how there would just be that tiny little sliver of that petal. So I'm going to adjust that. So that's a trick that you can do before you cut your things off to make sure that it's going to look good. Because of course, once you cut it off, you can't go back and ask me how I know. I've definitely done that before and not liked it. So use that trick to just double check your arrangement and see if you need to change anything. So again, I'll cut this off from the back. And these I just cut off. I didn't leave any overhanging at the top. It didn't seem to make too much sense to do that, just the way that they were arranged. And just take your time with that. There's quite a bit of layers, and in some cases there's foam adhesive, so it takes a little bit to get through. And then you can see that there. So I'm going to go ahead and put some foam adhesive behind most of the petals, not every single one of them, but most of them. I wanted dimension so that it would stick up from the card, and then also the petals in the front, I wanted those to be separated from the petals that they were on top of. The stencil that I used, I'll have all of the products listed below for what I used, but here is the first card that I made that I didn't have on film, but for this card I used the stone wall stencil to emboss the background. Again, stamping my sentiments first and then running that through to emboss it. And then for this one, what is this? Sketchy Lines? I think that's Sketchy Lines stencil. But I love the look of stamping your sentiment first and then embossing it. I think it just adds kind of an elegance to the card. I hope this project inspires you to look at your stamps a little bit differently. I do love taking a flower stamp set and creating a huge bloom with it. And there's a few stamps that lend itself really well to this in the Altenew collection. So take a look at your stamps. Here's kind of more of the traditional arrangement of Crocus. For this, I kind of thought of they were sprouting up out in between crevices of a stone walk or a sidewalk. And so that's what inspired me to use that particular stencil in the background. It's subtle. You can really see it and feel it in person, but in the photos, it's pretty subtle. So make sure you join us on the hop. I've seen some of the other cards, and there's just great inspiration of all different types and different ways to use your set. So definitely check that out. Be sure to leave a comment on my blog for a chance for a giveaway. And I so appreciate you guys stopping by. If you like this, hit the like, subscribe, and the bell button to be notified of more inspiration as it comes along. Thanks so much, guys. Have a good day.